Have you ever faced a challenge that seemed impossible, yet found the strength to push through? This is a story of grit, heart, and triumph. Samantha Hayes steps into Alexander Reed's opulent Manhattan mansion, her old sneakers damp with dew. Eyes wary yet determined. The triplets stand on the marble staircase, hurling pillows at her, shouting, "Country bumpkin! You'll run away like all the others." Maid, dragging her suitcase out the door, sneers, "No one lasts here more than a day." Samantha bends to pick up a pillow, smiling calmly. And minutes later, when the boys storm the hall on skateboards, to take her down like every other maid, she suddenly hops onto a skateboard, spins neatly in a circle, and all three boys freeze in shock. The grand hall, with its towering ceilings and crystal chandeliers, goes still, the echo of the skateboards fading. Samantha stands there, one foot steady on the board, her loose brown hair slipping from its messy ponytail. Tommy, Max, and Leo, the 5-year-old triplets, stare with wide eyes, their identical faces caught between mischief and awe. The elderly butler, Mr. Grayson, pushes his glasses up his nose, his weathered hands twitching as if he didn't know whether to clap or scold. The maid at the door, her suitcase half-sipped, mutters under her breath, "She quit in 5 minutes. They always do." Can you imagine facing chaos like that and turning it into calm? Stay with us on Thread Tales to see how Samantha does it. Tommy, the leader, with a smirk too big for his face, aims his water gun and sprays her cheek. Poor girl. "Country bumpkin," he taunts, his voice bouncing off the walls. Samantha wipes the water with her sleeve, slow and deliberate, her gaze locking onto his. She doesn't flinch, doesn't raise her voice. "Nice aim," she says, her tone even. "But next time, hit the vase over there." The boys blink, their laughter stalling. Mr. Grayson's eyebrows lift just a fraction. As Samantha gathers the scattered pillows, a sharp voice cuts through the hall. A tall maid, Clara, with perfectly manicured nails and a starched uniform, leans against a column, her lips curled in a mocking smile. "Look at her picking up after those brats already," she says, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Bet she's used to cleaning other people's messes. Probably grew up in a trailer park." The other maid stifles giggles, their eyes darting to Samantha. Tommy snickers, nudging Max. Samantha pauses, her hands full of pillows, her back. To Clara she turns slowly, her eyes meeting the maid's with a quiet intensity that makes Clara's smile falter. Without a word, Samantha walks to the staircase, sets the pillows neatly in place, and dusts her hands. "Better than breaking things you can't fix," she says, her voice soft but clear. Clara's face reddens, her nails digging into her palm as the hall falls silent again. "Hey, before we keep going, can you do Thread Tales a quick favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button on this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to Thread Tales. It keeps us going. Sharing stories like Samantha's stories about people who get knocked down but stand taller because of it. All right, let's dive back in." The triplets don't back off. Yes. They tear through the hall, their skateboards rattling like a storm on the marble floor. A lamp wobbles, then crashes, its porcelain base shattering into jagged pieces. The middle boy with a mop. Of curls, shouts, she's gonna cry and run, just like the others. Leo, the smallest, tosses a rubber ball that bounces off her knee and rolls under a table. Mr. Grayson sighs, his voice low and heavy. "You look too fragile." "Miss Hayes, you'll be gone by noon." Samantha doesn't answer. She kneels too. Gather the lamp's shards, her hands steady, her face unreadable. Then, without a word, she grabs a spare skateboard from the corner, steps on, and glides in a perfect loop around the chaos. The boys stop dead. She pulls up in front of them, her sneakers squeaking faintly. "New rule," she says, her voice calm but firm, like a teacher who knows she's already won. "Whoever knocks over a vase has to clean it up." Tommy's water gun drops to his side. Max's mouth hangs open. Leo's ball stays where it landed. For the first time in years, the triplets listen. How does one woman turn chaos into order with just a few words? Keep watching Thread Tales to find out. Later that morning, Samantha follows the boys to the playroom, where toys lay scattered like a hurricane's aftermath. As she bends to pick up a stray block, a sharp laugh rings out. Another maid, Ellen, short and wiry with a pinched face, stands in the doorway, arms crossed. Oh, look at the new nanny, already on her knees. She, says her voice dripping with scorn. Bet she's praying those kids don't eat her alive. Tommy, stacking blocks nearby, grins wickedly, picking up Ellen's tone. Yeah, she's gonna beg for mercy, he chimes in. Samantha keeps stacking blocks, her hands steady, but her jaw tightens for a split second. She stands, holding a single block, and walks to Tommy. Build something worth keeping, she says, placing the block in his hand. Then, turning to Ellen, she adds, or maybe just watch how it's done. Ellen's smirk freezes, her arms dropping as Samantha turns back to the boys. We're already piling blocks higher, their giggles replacing their taunts. Lunch is a whole different mess. The dining room, with its polished mahogany table and velvet, chairs, looks like it belongs in a palace, but the triplets turn it into a battlefield. Spaghetti flies, splattering the ceiling in red streaks. Orange juice drips onto the floor, pooling around the chair legs. Tommy smears ketchup across Samantha's sweater, laughing so hard he nearly falls over.
All the other maids cried and
Ran away, he says, his eyes daring her to break. Max flings a meatball that hits her shoulder, leaving a greasy stain. Leo pours his milk onto the table, watching it creep toward her hands. Mr. Grayson stands by the door, his arms crossed, shaking his head. Told you so, he mutters, his voice thick with pity. The maids in the kitchen whisper, their words sharp and clear through the open door. She's done for, one says. No one survives lunch with those devils, another adds, smirking. Samantha's fingers tighten on the table's edge, her sweater ruined, her hair sticking to her neck. She takes a deep breath, her eyes steady. Before the chaos can spiral further, Samantha claps her hands once, sharp and clear. The boys freeze, forks midair. She reaches into a drawer, pulls out 3 tiny aprons, and tosses one to each boy. All right, she says, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. Today, you're the head chefs. Whoever makes the best dish eats first. The triplets freeze, aprons dangling in their hands. Tommy squints like he's waiting for the trick. Max tilts his head, curious. Leo clutches his apron like it's a trophy. Samantha doesn't wait for them to argue. She grabs a bowl, some pasta, a jar of sauce, and sets them on the table. Go, she says, stepping back. The boys hesitate, then dive in. Tommy stacks pasta into a wobbly tower. Max tosses salad with a dramatic flourish. Leo smears sauce in careful swirls, his tongue poking out. 20 minutes later, the table looks like a real meal. Not a disaster. Alexander Reed walks in, his polished shoes clicking, his cold gray eyes scanning the room. He stops, his briefcase still in hand, staring at his son sitting quietly eating. Like humans. Chandelier's light catches his face, and for a moment, he looks almost human too. As the boys eat, a new voice slithers into the room. A groundskeeper, Paul, leans in from the hallway, his muddy boots smudging the floor, a sneer on his weathered face. Well, ain't this cute, he drawls, loud enough for everyone to hear. The nanny thinks she's a chef now. She's never seen a kitchen fancier than a diner. The maids in the kitchen snicker, peeking through the door. Max pauses, a fork full of pasta halfway to his mouth, glancing at Samantha. She doesn't look at Paul. Instead, she hands Leo a napkin, guiding his small hand to wipe sauce from his chin. Good chefs clean up after themselves, she says, her voice steady. Then without turning, she adds, and good workers know when to stay in their lane. Paul's sneer fades, his boots shifting uncomfortably as he backs out, the maids, laughter dying in their throats. The boys go back to eating, unaware of the weight of her words. The afternoon brings a new kind of trouble. Samantha heads to the garden, her sneakers crunching on the gravel path, looking for the boys. She doesn't see them hiding behind the glass doors until it's too late. They lock her out and flip. On the sprinkler system, cold water sprays from every angle, soaking her jeans, her sweater, her hair. Tommy waves his phone, recording her. Look, the nanny's soaked like a rat, he shouts, his voice sharp with glee. Max bangs on the glass, laughing until he wheezes. Leo presses his nose against the door, giggling. Inside, a maid whispers to another, her voice low but cutting. This is the final blow. Everyone quits after this trick. Mr. Grayson stands by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his face unreadable. Samantha's clothes cling to her, heavy and cold, water dripping from her fingertips. Smiles, slow and deliberate, and sets her shoes neatly by the door. She bends down, pretending to pick something up from the grass, and slips it into her pocket. "Oh, look," she calls through the glass, her voice steady despite the chill. "Your mom's treasure?" The boy's laughter stops cold. There. Mother had been gone 3 years, and the word treasure hits like a spark in dry grass. Tommy's phone lowers. Max's hand freezes on the lock. Leo's eyes go wide, his giggle gone. Samantha doesn't push, doesn't rush. She stands there, water streaming down her face, waiting. The boys unlock the door and run out, barefoot in the rain. She kneels, pulling 3 small items from her pocket: candy and stickers. Nothing special. 3 treasures, she says, handing one to each. Help me clean the garden, and they're yours. They work together, laughing as mud squishes between their toes, pulling weeds and stacking stones. Later, they dry off without a single complaint, their towels slung over, their shoulders like capes. That evening, as Samantha tucks the boys into bed, a shadow falls across the room. Clara, the tall maid from earlier, stands in the doorway, her arms crossed, a stack of linens in her hands. "Don't get too comfortable," she says, her voice low and venomous. "You're just a placeholder till Mr. Reed finds someone with actual class." The boys, half asleep, don't hear, but Samantha's hand pauses on Leo's blanket. She smooths it carefully, her fingers steady, then stands and faces Clara. "Class isn't something you wear," she says, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut. It's what you do when no one's watching. Clara's eyes narrow, but she steps back, the linen slipping slightly in her grip. Samantha turns back to the boys, humming softly as she dims the light, leaving Clara standing alone in the hall. That night, Alexander Reed comes home early, his tie already loosened. Samantha sits on the floor in the boys' room, reading a bedtime story about pirates and hidden gold. The triplets sprawl around her, their eyes heavy, their hands clutching stuffed animals. Tommy's head rests on her knee. Max's feet kick lazily. Leo's thumb hovers near his mouth. Alexander leans against the doorframe, his arms crossed, his face hard. "You just got lucky on day 1, he says, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Tomorrow, they'll be back to chaos." He steps closer, his shadow falling across the storybook. "Dozens of nannies have failed. You're no different." Samantha closes the book, her fingers lingering on the worn cover. She looks up, her eyes soft but unflinching. "Good night, Mr. Reed," she says, standing to leave. The boys stir, murmuring her name, their voices fading into sleep. At 2 a.m., the mansion's quiet breaks. Leo wakes up, burning with fever, his small body shaking under the blankets. The staff scrambles, their voices overlapping in a frantic hum as they dial the doctor. Samantha moves faster than anyone. She grabs a cool cloth, presses it to Leo's forehead, and checks his temperature with steady hands. She mixes electrolyte, water coaxing him to sip it, her voice low and soothing. When the doctor answers via video call, Samantha reports every detail: temperature, pulse, breathing like she'd done it her whole life. Alexander stands in the doorway, his shirt untucked, his eyes wide with something close to fear. Leo clings to Samantha's hand, his fingers tight around hers, and falls asleep against her chest. The doctor's voice crackles through the phone. "She's got this under control." Alexander's jaw tightens, but he doesn't move, doesn't speak. His hand rests on the doorframe, his knuckles white. The next morning, as Samantha carries Leo, still pale, but recovering, to the living room, she passes a group of maids in the hall. Ellen, the wiry one, steps forward, blocking her path. "Careful, don't drop the kid," she says, her voice loud enough to draw eyes. "Wouldn't want Mr. Reed to see you fumbling his precious boy." The other maids exchange glances, smirking. Samantha adjusts Leo gently, his head resting on her shoulder, and meets Ellen's gaze. "I don't drop what I'm trusted to hold," she says, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. She steps around Ellen, her stride steady, leaving the maid standing there, her smirk fading as the others turn away, their whispers trailing off. Leo stirs, murmuring, "Mommy Sam," his small hand clutching her sweater. The next morning, the kitchen hums with gossip. Samantha stands at the counter, cracking eggs for the boys' breakfast, her sweater still faintly stained with ketchup. Two maids linger by the sink, their voices low but sharp. "She'll be fired like the rest," one says, glancing at her. "Mr. Reed will never trust a single mom," the other adds, her smirk barely hidden. Samantha's knife pauses mid-chop, the blade catching the light. She doesn't turn, doesn't speak, just keeps slicing onions, her hands steady. The triplets burst in, their sneakers squeaking on the tile. "Mommy Sam," Tommy shouts, wrapping his arms around her legs. Max and Leo pile on, nearly knocking her over. Breakfast time. They yell, their voices bright and warm. Mr. Grayson stands by the door, his eyes misty, his hands clasped tight behind his back. Alexander walks in, his suit crisp, his face composed. He pauses, watching his sons climb onto stools, chattering about pancakes and syrup. Samantha sets plates in front of them, her movements smooth, unhurried. Alexander reaches for the coffee pot, pours a cup, and slides it across the counter to her. "Thank you," he says, his voice softer than before, for doing what no one else could. Samantha takes the cup, her fingers brushing the handle. She nods just once and turns back to the boys. The maids fall silent, their smirks gone. Outside, a tabloid photographer snaps a photo through the window, the headline already forming, "The Mysterious Woman Who Tamed the Billionaire's Devilish Triplets." Weeks later, during a rare quiet afternoon, Samantha sits with the boys in the music room, teaching them to tap rhythms on a small drum. The door creaks open, and Paul, the groundskeeper, stands there, his cap twisted in his hands. "Heard you're playing teacher now," he says, his voice thick with mockery. "What's next? Teaching M to mop floors like you?" Tommy's drumstick pauses, his eyes flicking to Samantha. She keeps tapping the drum, her rhythm steady, then hands the stick to Max. "Keep the beat," she says, her voice even. She stands, facing Paul, her hands loose at her sides. "They're learning to make something worth hearing," she says. "Maybe you could learn to say something worth listening to." Paul's jaw clenches, his cap crumbling in his grip as he turns and leaves, the door slamming behind him. The boys cheer, banging the drum louder, their laughter filling the room. Weeks pass, and the mansion begins to feel different. The triplets stop smashing vases. They eat at the table, not on the floor. They say, "Please and thank you," words no one had heard from them in years. Samantha doesn't demand it, she just shows them how. She'd kneel to tie their shoes, her hands gentle but firm, and they'd mimic her without realizing. Mr. Grayson starts smiling, his sighs replaced by soft chuckles. The maids stop packing their bags, though some still whisper behind closed doors. "She's just temporary," one says in the laundry room, folding sheets with a scowl. "She doesn't belong here," another mutters in the hall, her voice sharp. Samantha hears it all, her face unchanged, her focus on the boys. One afternoon, Samantha sits with the triplets in the library, helping them build a fort out of blankets and chairs. Tommy drapes a sheet over her shoulders like a cape, laughing. Max hands her a paper crown, insisting she's the queen of the fort. Leo curls up beside her, clutching a book about dinosaurs. Mr. Grayson passes by, carrying a tray of tea, and pauses to watch. His eyes soften, his mouth curving into a rare smile. A maid lingering nearby whispers to another she's got them wrapped around her finger. It won't last. Samantha tucks a blanket around Leo, her hands gentle, ignoring the words. The boys don't notice the whispers either. They're too busy laughing, their voices filling the room like music. During a rainy afternoon, Samantha leads the boys to the attic to explore old trunks filled with forgotten toys. As they dig through dusty books and wooden trains, Clara appears at the top of the stairs, her heels clicking sharply. "Playing in the dirt again?" she says, her voice laced with disdain. "You're turning this house into a pigsty and those kids into street rats." Max drops a toy car, his eyes narrowing. Samantha picks it up, dusting it off, and hands it back to him. "We're finding stories up here," she says, her voice calm but firm. "Better than spreading ones that aren't true." She opens a trunk, pulling out a faded photo of a young woman laughing with 3 small boys, Alexander's late wife. The triplets crowd around, their chatter softening. Clara's heels click as she retreats, her face pale, the attic door closing with a thud. The garden becomes their favorite place. Samantha teaches the boys how to plant seeds, her hands guiding theirs into the soft earth. Tommy digs too deep, flinging dirt everywhere. Max tries to plant a stick, insisting it'll grow into a tree. Leo carefully presses a seed into the soil, his face serious. Samantha doesn't laugh at their mistakes. She just shows them again, her voice patient. One evening, as the sun dips low, the boys run circles around her, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Alexander stands by the fountain, watching from a distance. His suit is wrinkled, his hair slightly mussed as if he'd rushed home. Tommy tugs his father's hand, his voice loud and clear. "Daddy, can Mommy Sam stay forever?" Max and Leo nod, their eyes bright. Sander kneels, his suit jacket brushing the grass. He looks at Samantha, standing there in her old jeans and sweater, her hair loose in the breeze. "Samantha," he says, his voice steady but warm. He pulls a small box from his pocket, the ring inside catching the golden light. "Will you?" The boys hold their breath. Samantha's lips part, her eyes searching his. She nods slow and sure. The triplets cheer, tackling her in a hug, their voices a joyful tangle. The next day, as Samantha walks the boys to the garden, Ellen stands by the glass doors, her arms crossed, a tabloid in her hand. "Look at this," she calls out, waving the paper. "They're calling you the billionaire's charity case. Bet you're loving the spotlight, huh?" The boys stop, their hands tightening around Samantha's. She takes the tabloid, glances at the headline, and folds it neatly. "They can write what they want," she says, her voice steady. "But you don't get to rewrite who I am." She hands the paper back, her eyes locked on Ellen's, and leads the boys outside. Later, a delivery arrives, a new gardening kit. For the boys, with a note from Alexander, "For the family we're building." Ellen's face burns as she sweeps the hall, the tabloid crumpled in the trash. The news hits like a storm. Tabloids scream, billionaire's nanny becomes bride. The maids who'd whispered find their hours cut, their names quietly dropped from the roster. One caught gossiping to a reporter sees her face plastered online, her words mocked by thousands. Another who'd sneered at Samantha's sneakers loses her job when a vase she'd neglected shatters under her watch. A third who'd spread rumors about Samantha's past finds her social media accounts flooded with comments calling her out. No one gloats. No one has to. The truth moves like a slow, steady wave, washing away the lies. Samantha doesn't look back, doesn't linger on their apologies. She walks forward, her hand in Alexander's, the boys racing ahead, their laughter brighter than the golden lights. One evening, as Samantha helps the boys paint birdhouses in the garden shed, Paul storms in, his face red, a letter in his hand. "You think you're untouchable now, don't you?" he spits, waving the paper warning about his job performance. "You're just a nobody who got lucky." Tommy's paintbrush freezes, dripping blue onto the table. Samantha dips her brush in red, painting a careful stripe on Leo's birdhouse. "Luck's what you make of it," she says, her voice calm. "Maybe try making some of your own." She hands Tommy a clean brush, guiding his hand to finish his work. All crumples. The letter, his boots stomping out, leaving a trail of mud that Mr. Grayson later sweeps away. The boys paint on their birdhouses bright under the shed's soft light. The mansion transforms bit by bit. The marble floors, once cold and echoing, feel warm under the boys' socked feet. The dining room, once a war zone, becomes a place for stories and syrup-sticky fingers. Samantha doesn't change, not really. She still ties the boys' shoes, still makes their breakfast, still reads them stories about pirates and dragons. But now, when she walks through the halls, no one whispers, no one smirks. They nod or smile or step aside. She doesn't demand respect, just carries it in the way she holds her shoulders, the way her eyes meet theirs. The triplets grow taller, their mischief softer, their laughter louder. Alexander's cold edges thaw, his voice warmer when he calls her name. Mr. Grayson. Once stiff and formal, starts leaving small gifts on her desk, a book of poetry, a mug with her initials. A quiet nod of thanks. One quiet morning, Samantha stands in the hall, her sneakers swapped for soft flats, her sweater replaced by a simple dress. The triplets sit cross-legged on the marble floor, drawing pictures of her with crayons. Tommy shows her on a skateboard, her hair flying. Max's has her in an apron, holding a plate of pancakes. Leo's is just her face, smiling with a crown of flowers. Alexander leans against the wall, watching them, his tie loose, his face soft. Mr. Grayson passes by, pausing to adjust a frame on the wall, a photo of Samantha and the boys laughing in the rain, their faces bright with mud and joy. The mansion feels like a home now, not a museum. The air is lighter, the walls warmer, the silence filled with the hum of life. During a family dinner, as Samantha passes a bowl of mashed potatoes to Tommy, a new maid, Lisa hovers nearby, her eyes sharp. Funny how some people climb the ladder. So fast, she says, her voice loud enough to carry. Must be nice to charm your way to the top. The table goes quiet, forks pausing. Alexander's hand tightens on his glass. Samantha sets the bowl down, her movements deliberate, and looks at Lisa. I didn't climb, she says, her voice steady. I walked through the door. You're too scared to open. She turns to Max, helping him scoop potatoes, her smile soft. Lisa's face flushes, and she busies herself clearing plates, her hands trembling. The boys chatter on, unaware, but Alexander's gaze lingers on Samantha. A quiet pride in his eyes. Samantha never speaks about her past, but it shows in small moments. The way she pauses when a certain song plays on the radio, her fingers tightening. Around a spoon? The way she glances at a locket tucked in her bag, its clasp worn from years of touch. The way she smiles at the boys' laughter, her eyes carrying a weight no one can name. She'd raised her daughter alone in a small apartment with creaky floors and thin walls, working double shifts to pay the bills. She'd faced whispers and sneers before neighbors, who judged her faded clothes, bosses who doubted her strength. But she'd kept going, her heart steady, her hands never idle. Now in this mansion, she does the same, turning chaos into order, doubt into trust. One evening, Samantha sits on the garden bench, the boys asleep upstairs. The air is warm, the stars bright above the stone walls. Alexander joins her, his hand finding hers, his fingers weaving through hers like they'd always belonged there. They don't speak, don't need to. The mansion glows softly behind them, its windows warm with light. Samantha had come here with nothing but a pair of worn sneakers and a heart that wouldn't break. She'd faced the chaos, the cruelty, the doubt, and turned it into something new, not by fighting, not by proving, but by being. And in that quiet, steady being, she'd changed everything, to everyone who's ever been judged. Dismissed, or told you don't belong, you're not wrong. You're not alone. Your strength is real, and it's enough. Just keep walking, keep being. The truth will catch up, steady and sure, like a sunrise you didn't see coming. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow too. Walk with thread tales through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.